June, and it's a new month. Well, it means it's a new month. Took a couple of days off, but now we're back. I think we're going to put a Bigsby on a guitar today, on the 40,000 subscriber giveaway guitar. Doing a couple other little things here first though. So we have this fridge, this Dometic refrigerator that we leave in the Jeep, and it works awesome while we're on the road and traveling, and we use it all the time. This is probably one of my favorite things that we own, honestly, because it really helps us out. So today we're gonna go pick up some frozen stuff, which is like 40 miles away, but it's frozen. This thing will go down to 0 degrees Fahrenheit, but it cools down faster. It's 12 volt and 110, but it cools down faster on 110. So I'll just leave it plugged in here for a couple hours, and then by the time we go, boom, 0 degrees. So it's 72 degrees in there now, and I have it set for 12 degrees Fahrenheit, and that will probably take about 20 minutes or something to get down, and then we'll throw it back in the Jeep, and it actually plugs into a cigarette lighter. I want to say in the Jeep it'll stay, like if you leave it in there all the time, it'll stay like 28 degrees pretty well, but it meters it based on if the car's on or not, because it doesn't want to kill your battery. It's like got like a smart thing in an app and stuff. If we're going to do any like quick deep freeze kind of thing, plug it into the wall, and then maintains that cold a lot easier. All right, so let's go through the steps of putting the bridge and the Bigsby on the 40,000 subscriber giveaway guitar. Remember, you can win this guitar, so go to DylanContest.com. We have, like, I just checked, I think it's 38,600 subscribers right now. So we need to get 1,400 more, and then we give this thing away. Sounds pretty awesome. So I need to get it done because we're getting close. So let's talk about how we do this. First thing I wanted to do before anything was pin this bridge to the body of the guitar. So basically I just measured it all up, drilled a pilot hole, and screwed it to the guitar. And the only other little thing I need to do to this now, I need to actually take this back off, and I think I need to run my pilot hole literally like an 1/8 of an inch deeper or a 1/16 of an inch deeper, just so I can get a little bit tighter so that it doesn't move so much, and it'll be perfect. That way the person that wins the guitar has a guitar with a floating bridge, but it's pinned, and it's, I mean, this is legit Bigsby looking, or you know, Gretsch looking stuff. So this is pretty cool. And then we have to get to mounting the Bigsby. So just like we talked about the other day, use the string around the tuning keys to get it basically in line. But I go a little further with this, and I measure everything with a caliper. So I take my calipers, once the bridge is where I want it to be, and I know the center line because I just figured out the center line for the bridge. So then I figure out the center line for the Bigsby. And then I take a caliper and I measure the distance. You know, this moves, but I made sure that I got it right. And then which took a few times. And then I take the caliper and I measure this distance to make sure that these bars are parallel. That's probably one of the most important things about a Bigsby, is making sure that there's two big things. Making sure that these bars here and here are parallel with the bridge. Now, a lot of people are going to ask, what is the reasoning for the distance from here to here? I honestly don't know. I've done tons of these. I've experimented with it, and I don't know if there is a rule for it. I could probably find out, but I don't know. So my personal rule is I want it to be close to the bridge because I want a good break angle over the back of the saddles, but I don't want it to be so close that it binds anything up. So somewhere around 2 1/4 inches seems to be what I end up at. Between 2 and 2 1/2, depending on the guitar, depending on the height of the bridge, depending on a lot of things. But like this one I think is at 2 1/4, so, or just over 2 inches. So that's where it ended up. Once I figure that, I tape everything down, and then we drill pilot holes. I'm drilling holes in the guitar. Screw pilot holes are drilled. I hear coffee. Once we drill our pilot holes, then I drill the next holes. In the clip you just saw, you'll notice that I drilled these 3 screws and I left this one for last. The only reason was because the felt that they put on it kind of plugs up that hole, and I didn't want the drill bit to walk around on top of that felt because these are self-centering screws. So I just made sure that everything was in the right spot and then left that one for last. That's the only reason. And I left the felt on because it took some doing to get the thing square to the guitar. If you just bolt it down without the felt, you'll have problems. One of the big things that I learned with this guitar, now I've used B50s before, licensed Bigsbys. I'm not a fan. B5s all the way. Because we're trying to keep this within reason, I used a B50 and it will be good when it's done. I'll mess with it so that it's good. However, if you're not familiar and you want to put a Bigsby on your guitar, get a real one. Do not buy the licensed one. Do not buy garbage ones off of eBay, Guitar Fetish, anywhere of those places that sell that stuff. Spring for the money and get a real one. Here's why. See how this doesn't move? And that is a bad thing. You want that thing to actually flop around, right? You want to be able to like and have it flop, because when you're using it, you want it to be able to return to pitch. If it's binding, your guitar's not returning to pitch. The reason it's not returning to pitch and it's not flopping around properly, but it's because the tolerances in this thing, there's a little set screw in here with a little self-centering hole, and that little self-centering hole is too close. It binds everything up, so when I tighten this up, it gets too stiff. If you loosen it a little bit, it's perfect. See, that's what you're supposed to have. Just like that. That's how that's supposed to be, okay? The problem is if you leave it like that, then the handle is loose. I've never had this problem with a B5 or a B16. Ever, 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 ever. I've never had a problem with the American-made ones. Only with import ones. So just keep that in mind if you're going to put one of these on a guitar. And what you might have to do, if you do this, is leave it loose. See, even that. And then constantly... And just like constantly maintain it so the screw doesn't fall out. Like that's what you might have to do. What I'm probably going to do is I'm going to get in there and I am going to grind on this thing so that it sits properly, so that the person that gets this guitar, it works right. But this is one of those things where if you spring for the good one, you will not have these problems. If you cheap out and get the import one, you will not like having a Bigsby. And I think this is one of the reasons why people don't like having a Bigsby. Because they cheap out. Get a good one. So I guess the next step is, and we'll make its own video about it, is putting the nut in this thing, because we're going to try to use a zero glide if it works properly. This has been a really fun experiment. There's going to be a couple of adjustments that we're probably going to have to make as we do the setup on this guitar. Now that the Bigsby is squarely on the guitar, the bridge is in the right place, I do want to make sure that I can tighten it down just a little more so that it doesn't move so much, so that the end user doesn't have an issue. And then the other thing that we may have to do is take a little bit more material off the bottom to bring the bridge down, to give myself a little bit more adjustment. I don't really want to shim the neck any more than it already is, so we're probably going to take a little bit more out of the bridge to get the string height right. So once we get to setting up the guitar, that will be happening. So in the next video, you're going to see the zero glide nut install. And that's another thing. I mean, I've done this stuff before millions of times, but I've actually never done a zero glide, so I'm kind of excited about playing with it and seeing how they work. Tell you what, before I let you go, let's go ahead and go over a few viewer comments. And then tonight, I'm going to go through all the comments on the Fishman Fluence video, or I mean on the Jackson video with the rail pickups in it, and I'm gonna pick a name for these pickups because I have not done that yet. So that's gonna happen probably tonight. So in our next video, we'll announce that winner. Let's go ahead and go over a couple of viewer comments. On our video about the blades, which we are going to pick the winner for that in our next video, Nick M says, I'm not sure what you're hearing, but the dirty sound is really bad. It's like the direct sound without any speaker modeling. So I went back and looked, and you are right. So I had, speaker modeling was on in the Kemper, but I didn't have it set like I normally do. Somehow in headphones, it sounded okay, but it sounded fine actually. But then you're right, I listened to it back through the video, and like the combination of compression from YouTube and etc., it wasn't awesome. So I went ahead and fixed it in my Kemper. Pure cabinet settings were incorrect, and a couple other settings were incorrect. So thank you for that. So we adjusted to that as we went. I appreciate it. Michael says, so noiseless, well, this is like a noiseless versus single coil video. And I did address him in this, but I want to talk about it. Noiseless single coils are no good, and you don't make them, but you do make regular humbuckers. You're so full of... Okay, here's the thing about noiseless single coils. Humbuckers are made... Well, let's talk about humbuckers first. Humbuckers are made to sound a certain way. I don't like... And everybody knows this. I've said this for years. On my channel, in public, on podcasts, on radio shows that I've been on, everywhere I've ever been, I've always said, if you want a humbucker, get a humbucker. If you want a single coil, get a single coil. When you stack two coils on top of each other for a noise canceling single coil, the problem is, by nature, it cuts out frequencies that you don't want to cut out otherwise. Now, a humbucker, everybody has accepted that that's how that works. But with a single coil, you're trying to mask or solve a problem, and to me, it's a Band-Aid thing, and I just don't like them. I just don't like them. Does that mean that you shouldn't like them? No, don't do what I say to do. I mean, I'm not. But at the same time, just know that it's very difficult. That is a compromised pickup. It's very difficult to get a pure single coil sound out of a single coil that's not really a single coil, that is a humbucker. And so I just don't, I don't know. I just don't like them. I personally am just not a fan. That's all it really is. I wouldn't say that all PCB switches are bad. I've used Shaler Mega switches in 2 of my guitars for almost 20 years. I know a lot of techs that are down on them because they can't figure out special case wiring on them, but they are durable and they don't have the little legs on them, which could be difficult for some people, but sometimes import really is a serious upgrade. Absolutely. So obviously there's nothing wrong with import. The majority of our audience isn't even in the United States. So I don't go off on this whole it has to be made in the United States thing. There is good craftsmanship everywhere in the world. But what I am specifically speaking of in this situation is the less expensive import guitars when you're talking $200, $300, and they're putting those really cheap Cortex switches in. But you are correct as well, and I wanted to mention this because you are correct as well. Some of these, like he talked about the Shaler Mega switch, some of these switches are built with a PCB board on purpose so that they can contain more functionality in a smaller space. And that is really cool. Obviously, that's what PCB is for. There's nothing wrong with PCB. There's nothing wrong with it at all. Even those Gibson tone circuits that are PCB, there's nothing wrong with that stuff. A circuit board passes electricity just as effectively as a wire does. And when we're talking about no amperage here, we're talking about very low voltage, a PCB board will be completely fine in a guitar. It will not suck tone. That is all a bunch of crap, and it's a total myth. However, when you're working with it, you have to be much more careful. And those cheap switches that we're discussing have a friction element to them that it rubs back and forth, and they self-destruct over time. So that is what we're concerned with. If you have a PCB board that is just a contact traces and it's actually just a way for electricity to go through, no problem at all. I just wouldn't introduce too much friction in a switch. And that's it. Thanks for hanging out. Drinking a New Belgian Brewing Company Nitro Cold Brew in honor of some comments that we got that were much more negative about why I shouldn't distract you with things other than guitar. I love lots of stuff. I don't think people realize guitars are a very small part of who I am and my history. And of course, you being on the other end of a YouTube channel may not realize this. It's a big part of my life for sure since I was a kid. But there's many other interests, and I think it is possible for people to be interested in more than one thing and still give that stuff justice. I'm a big sailing person. I like RC cars. I like guitars about 20% as much as I like motorcycles. Anything you can race. You put two things together. I don't care if it's a shopping buggy. I don't care if it's a skateboard. I don't care if it's a razor scooter or if it's a Top Fuel dragster. You put two of them next to each other, I'm gonna race you. Bar stool with wheels on it, doesn't matter. I love racing. Have 2 world records at Bonneville. Love lots of other things other than guitar. So if you for some reason are offended or distracted by a couple things we throw in here once in a while, I'm not gonna apologize. So there's a little background, little this and that, 4-wheeling, off-roading. I'm not really a Jeep guy, to tell you the truth. I have one, but it's because of this. I'm a Land Rover guy through and through. I love them. I'm a Land Rover guy. I've had a few, built them, made them into like expedition overlanding vehicles, made one into a rock crawler. But I've had Jeeps. This is not my first Jeep. But the only reason we have it is because to tow behind the motorhome, it's the easiest thing to tow. So I enjoy it. I do love it. And when I bought it, I was like, I'm gonna get the best one because there's no point in not having, I mean, it's already got Data 44s and it's already got blah, blah, all the stuff, slow transfer case and all that stuff. So I don't really have to mod it a whole lot. That's why I got the Rubicon Recon. I would much rather have a Land Rover, Defender 90 or an old Disco or a P38 Range Rover or something like that. But you can't tow them because either they're too heavy or the way the transfer case works, you can't lock everything out. So for anybody that is interested in any other stuff, let me know. And make sure you check out our other YouTube channel because that's where most of that material lives, even though some of it kind of bleeds over here sometimes. And you're gonna see more of it after our little June or our May vloggy thing. I just love this loose format, man. I think it's fun. So thanks for hanging out. We'll see you soon.